All right, for the last year and a half, couple years, we've been designing saltwater baits for Strike King, and this is becoming one of my favorites, and it's called the Flood Minnow. There's a couple different reasons why I really like this. It's such a versatile bait. It can be used in shallow water, over grass beds, it can be used over flats, like sand flats, oyster reefs, and then it's just such a very good deep water jigging style bait. So the action of the bait, because of the density of the pore that we use for the plastic here, it's very thick up here where the hook is going to be, so it doesn't tend to tear, doesn't tend to rip after a few bites. And then as we come down towards the tail, it's a little bit softer, so you can see just the way that I'm holding it, how much action it's got just in a little bit of breeze or moving my hand. So you can imagine as you're bringing this bait through the water, whether it's a slow, medium, or fast retrieve, or just a vertical jigging, what type of action you have on this bait. And really, that's what induces the strike, okay? It sends off vibration, it sends off a little bit of noise. So the lateral lines on the fish, they start getting excited. They know that something is around them that is either wounded, acting a little erratic, or it just needs to be eaten, period. So that's what this is all about. I can rig this so many different ways. Right here, I have it rigged on a weedless mustad hook, so that I can cast it into thick cover. When I talk about in saltwater thick cover, I'm talking about grass beds, hydrilla, whether it's eelgrass, different types of grasses that we have in saltwater, and especially during the summertime, it becomes thick. So this is a perfect bait that if you're in shallow water, rigged weedless like this, and casting up into the grass, because the fish will sit in the grass. And they're down there for a reason, because there's a tremendous amount of bait fish, little snails that grows on the grass, and that's what they're feeding on. So if you cast this, especially in the small sand pockets or holes in the grass, or flutter it through the grass, this is going to work perfect. It's going to fish clean, it's going to have a tremendous amount of action, and you're going to get the strikes. And it really doesn't matter what type of fish that you're targeting. It can be redfish, it can be speckled trout, it can be snook, it can be permit, it can be anything that swims in the close-in coastal waters or inshore waters of saltwater. This is a perfect bait for a lot of action to get a lot of strikes. And another way that I like to fish it, especially when I'm jigging, okay, we take this bait and have this right here is a 3/8 ounce jig head. I'll go up to even a 1/2 ounce jig head, depending on the depth, depending on the current. When I'm fishing this style, I want the bait to go to the bottom as fast as possible, because I know that I'm in a situation that has structure on the bottom, whether it's oysters, whether it's rocks, whether it's just a drop off from a shallow water area dropping down into a deep water ledge. Along that edge of that ledge is where I want this bait to be. But I want it to get to the bottom, because the predator fish will sit down there in the current waiting for bait to come by them and just pounce on it. So if this is not enough weight to get you to the bottom quick because of the current you're fishing in, it's very simple. I'll just add a sliding weight on my leader right up against the head of the jig head right here. Now you say, okay, well, why don't you just go to a 1 ounce jig head, 3/4 ounce jig head, 2 ounce jig head, 1.5 ounces, whatever. The reason being, most jig heads, once they get past, let's say, 3/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce, the head becomes so big, and it's very hard to rig it to make it look natural on the bait. So I try to stay with the smaller jig heads, add the sliding sinker, and also when you're vertically jigging, that sliding weight is beating against this jig head, making a sound that also attracts the fish. And I'll use this bait anywhere from 3 foot of water to 20 foot of water. Just lift your rod tip up, slowly let it go back down so that it's bouncing on the bottom and it's leaving a little mud trail or a sand trail on the bottom that you're working. Just don't let it sit there, because if you let it sit there, it's going to get hung up. You drop it down, feel it with your rod tip. As soon as you feel that knock on the bottom, you just pick your rod tip up and then let it flutter right back down. Walk it across that hump of whether it's rocks, whether it's just a hump of sand or whatever, just walk it right across. And when it gets to the other side and it drops off into the deeper end, let it drop down slowly, because that's where you're probably going to get a good strike.